do you now feel that you live a life that's worth living?
If anyone looks at my life now, it'd be a complete embarrassment. Home isn't the happiest place in the world, but you can only cope for so long, and then you start running out of even that, and my response to that was to use humor. Not that I'm saying it was intelligent or it was beautiful or anything, but it was just a kid experimenting, having fun, and I got smacked for it. If I look back now at my childhood, what I was no longer perceived as he's naughty and constant still. It was like, oh my word, keep doing that. That's good. Within, I think, my second audition, I landed a worldwide commercial for Mentos. All of a sudden, you're on a cover of a magazine and you start buying your own press. You think, well, it's because I'm special. He was now flipping the camera of the movie of my life and he's showing me the picture from his point of view. And he said to me, you came to the city to take from it. I want you to serve the city. And here I am, 40-year-old, just turned 40. And I'm working for these two acts. Driving a cab in LA. People from very known magazines say, how can you tell the story? Isn't it embarrassing? I'm like, no, it's the flippant opposite of embarrassing. And he's standing in that field and he's going, I'll give you the clothes of my back, just please. And nothing. That's when I thought, this faith is now faith like potatoes. He looked me straight in the eye and they were literally almost the first words out of his mouth other than hello was, my boy, if you're going to play me in the movie, the Lord's going to take you through fire.
Frank.
Yes.
It's good to have you here.
It's good to be here.
I always like to start these conversations by painting the picture from where everything started. Mm-hmm. So give us some of your earliest context that shaped the person that you are today.
I wanted to be married when I was 5, but I had difficulty with that because I would have had to kiss the bride, and I didn't want anybody to know that I was actually in love with someone. So it was a bit of a complicated situation. No, I'm just having fun. But no, I grew up in East London, small town at that time. It was a small town. My dad was a doctor, so that was kind of like a bit of social currency as a kid, because your dad's the doctor. He's the guy that can fix people, So my mom was a dance teacher. She was a clothing designer. She's like a real artist, So that's what she is, or was as well. And then my brothers, I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister. So I was the middle one. Was I like to put it, the forgotten generation, because my 2 older brothers were quite naughty and took up a lot of time. And then, of course, the little princess comes 5 years after me. So, and she was a sweetheart. So, I was the observer of like both sides of that, Childhood for me was a mixed bag. I was good at sport. I enjoyed sport, stuff like that. I was a popular kid at school, but I think home wasn't the happiest place in the world. I think Bono quoted it in a song that he wrote about his dad, and he said, a house doesn't make a home. So you can have a house but not a home. And for some reason, I didn't quite always feel at home, as I actually talk about in my book. And I wasn't really sure why it was like that, but I just always knew I felt more comfortable at other people's homes or, and stuff like that. And only later on in my life, and we can maybe get into it later, did I start realizing, okay, that's why essentially when you don't feel safe, then it's virtually impossible for a house to feel like a home, So that certainly shaped and influenced me. I think the kind of personality I have, my response to that was to use humor to deal with difficult times, or if I'm in uncomfortable situations, I can make a joke out of just about anything. I've always been super enthusiastic about stuff and life and so on. So I'd use a lot of that raw energy to cope. But you can only cope for so long, and then you start running out of even that, and then when it does happen, the wheels really come off spectacularly. And I think that's what happened to me when I was 18 and a girl broke up with me, because I think she was a lovely girl, but she was a substitute for my family. And so when she broke up with me, it felt like my heart got broken twice, in that sense. And when the wheels did spectacularly come off at that point, the only thing that comforted me was bizarrely reading the Bible and praying. And I was 18 at the time, and I think that's really where the rest of my life journey started. And then just to end off this question, I moved overseas to France to go and take up a deal to play rugby. And it was weird because in the first few months, I felt like a completely different person. It's almost like someone took me out of soil that didn't work and then put me in soil where all of a sudden I started realizing, whoa, there's life. There's a whole bunch of other things going on here. And I think what would sum that up, and I'll end with this, is I remember standing in my apartment in France one morning, and I just sensed like God's presence in the room. And I felt a gentle whisper, and I love that idea because I just recently listened to again about Elijah, where it says God came or the hurricane came, the fire came, the wind came, all kind, the rain came or the storm, or whatever it was, and then the gentle whisper came, and that's where you heard him. And in that gentle whisper, I heard this was, you have kid your parents, you've kid your friends, your teachers, everybody, but you've never kid me about who you are. I know who you are. You even kid yourself. And I'm going to show you who you are. That's what we're going to do here. And that was 32 years ago, and that journey hasn't stopped.
Wow.
So, yeah.
You mentioned a few things in terms of your high energy, enjoying the attention and stuff like that. Did you always know that you want to become an actor? No, because I think when something is so obvious in you, sometimes you can't see it. So you think that that's how life is for everybody. This is normal. Everyone feels this way. And so I think the best way I can describe it is that if I look back now at my childhood, there were clear hints that I now can recognize, oh, of course. But at the time, it just felt like this is how things are for everybody. I'll give you a couple of examples. First one, when I was about 4 years old, I was in a nursery school play, in a nativity play. And We've all been there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I don't know if you all did what I did, but I was a wise man in this nativity play. Okay, I was one of the 3 wise men. And so when it came to giving the gifts, instead of giving the gift, I decided to put my gift down and go to the front of the stage, lie on my belly and slide down. And my parents said the whole audience went, because this kid's going to fall. And I heard it, looked around, smiled at them and thought, this is cool. And I slid back up. And everyone was like, whew. And then I slid back down. And so I pretty much made the show about me, which, super 4-year-old narcissistic behavior. But the point is, I think there was a joy and a reaction. That's one of my first memories. Because I remember that play. I remember the blue outfit that I had and everything. But it's one of my first memories of knowing, oh, I can influence people with being funny or with being silly or whatever. Because that to me, I was playing as a kid. I was 4 years old. And then the second time was when I was 15. I was in a play called Hello, Dolly. It is this beautiful American play, massive chorus line and everything. And I was in it purely because they came to our gym where I was doing gymnastics. I used to do competitive gymnastics. And they said, we need tumblers. And then me and another kid said, okay, cool, we'll do it. And then I remember the first few rehearsals, just feeling like I was in another world of excitement and joy. And because what I was no longer perceived as he's naughty and can't sit still. It was like, oh my word, keep doing that. That's good. This is what we need. We need this kind of energy and this kind of give. And then I remember after a few weeks, we had done a few runs and we had a standing ovation on the final night, and like a long one, And afterwards, the director, who was this famous South African stage play director, his name was David Matheson, and he spoke to me and this other 14-year-old kid, and he said, what did you feel when you stood there with your arms in the air and the audience gave you a standing ovation? And before I could say anything, this kid went, oh, I just wanted them to stop. My arms are getting so tired. Well, that guy works in IT today. Okay.
Needless to say.
And the director, I could see how disappointed he was, and he looked at me and I had goosebumps from the tips of my toes to the tips of my fingers. And I just was like, this is insane. And he just went, yeah, that's sort of what I was hoping to hear. And those were just hints, because I didn't just go, oh gosh, I need to get into acting. This is my new passion. It was so much how I am. I couldn't see it. And then, and then when I was in London, I thought, I just want to do modeling, As I said, I spoke to a men's group on Wednesday night, and I said to him, I think I was influenced by the theology of Dire Straits, money for nothing and chicks for free. via modeling, I kind of ended up. My first movie I did was in 1993, and I was an extra in a movie called A Backbeat about the life of the Beatles with Stephen Dorff was in the lead role, and it was shot in Notting Hill in London. And again, I was in this environment where I went, I don't want to leave. I can sleep here. This is happy days. Money, not that I don't care about money, but it wasn't even about the cash. It was just literally, I love this place. This is happier than any office I will ever be in, or, and so when I got back to South Africa in 94, and then moved to Cape Town, and then modeling to pay for my degree. But then very quickly, within, I think, my second audition, I landed a worldwide commercial for Mentos. My agent was like, what did you do? Like, how did you, what did you do? Because they just thought, we're just sending one of many to this audition, see where it lands kind of thing, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. And it stuck in a big way. And I said, I don't know, but it was what I used to get into trouble for at school, being energetic and friendly. And somehow when the camera turns on, it makes me feel alive. And it triggers something in me to go, hey, how can I make you feel alive? Or how can I, clearly the director must have seen it. And then the rest is history, because then Seven Laan followed from there and so on.
Before we go to Seven Laan, why do you think that feeling was so important to you? Was it more about what you felt inside, or what it was doing to other people? Or was it
I think when I was younger, it was definitely how I felt, because and there's so many situations I felt nothing. Like school for me, I think I checked out when I was about 6. I'm be honest, and I know when I checked out. I know the specific incident. We were told to paint. Remember those powder paints? You had to put your own water in and then mix it and then paint and whatever. And so we were supposed to paint flowers in a flower pot. But I got my mix wrong. So my paint started flowing, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. And I started mixing it all together, and then I got a hiding for not doing the right thing. Oh, it's freaking art, bro.
It's just abstract.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, I was Jason Pollack. You would have smacked him over the head, Not that I'm saying it was intelligent or it was beautiful or anything, but it was just a kid experimenting, having fun, and I got smacked for it. And I think at that point I just went, this is like home, dude. I ain't doing nothing. And so what happens is it kills your spirit. So I think when I found something that made me feel alive, I was like, I want more of that. And it's only later on, through a lot of, I guess, healing and understanding the arts better, understanding what is art, how do you get involved in art, and how you can use art to do stuff or to move people or whatever. It's only then that I started finding my voice. Because the one thing I say to young people a lot, and you can say it to middle-aged or older people as well, because it's not an automatic thing that happens, is one thing is you didn't ask for your gifting. It was given to you. You didn't ask for how you look. It was given to you. Those are givens. So if you're really good at a particular thing and you look great doing it or whatever, that's one thing. But it's really cheap, to be honest, because it's just something that was given to you and you're not using it for who? Well, for you. But the key to setting artists apart, why does U2 have so much weight? Why do they have so much influence or whatever? In particular when they were, doing their massive tours, and they're still doing it, right? Is because, like what Bono said, is I found my voice. I found something to say. But you only find your voice if you've paid something, if you've paid a really hard sacrificial lessons in life in order to have something to say. And then your gift and your talent and what you look like, whatever, that's just a vehicle to help move the thing that you've got to say. I listened to a podcast I did about a great director, and he said this. He literally asked him, what you've been a director for 40 years, what's your advice? And he said, well, go and live your life and find something to say. And when you have something to say, come say it. But don't pretend you've got something to say, or just make us adore you for your wonderful talents and gifts, because that's all about you. That's not got nothing to do with the audience. And when you're directing or acting, whatever, it's got to do with the audience. And so, when I was younger, I was just trying to find my feet. I was trying to figure out, who am I? What is my gifting? How do people respond to me? And that sort of thing. But as I've gotten older, I realized the value of having a voice and the value of it not being about me. It's about the audience. It's about, how you're ministering to them, how you're making them a hero.
And listening to that, how big of a role do you think your circumstances at home played in fueling that? Because obviously, if you didn't necessarily get the attention at home between your siblings, but then all of a sudden you get onto a stage or in front of a camera or whatever, and that energy and that feeling is there,
Oh, it massively influences it. The problem is, though, if you try and heal the wounds you have from your childhood with the gifts and the look you have, it'll just widen the wounds, because it becomes a pursuit in selfishness, and you don't know it. That's the worst part. And then also pride kicks in, because the reason why pride kicks in is because you only get joy from your performance because you were better than someone else, not because of the performance in and of itself. And that becomes a nasty. And unfortunately, I've seen that in myself, and I've seen it in others, and I've seen how that really sabotages a particular show or a movie or a thing like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, how did it influence it? I think at first it influenced it in a way that in me in particular, there's overconfidence, there's arrogance. That's 100% what happens. All of a sudden you're on a cover of a magazine and you start buying your own press. You think, well, it's because I'm special and because I am better. You know what I mean? But, when they don't pick you the next time, then all of a sudden your whole world falls apart because your identity was built on that false narrative. But really what's underneath all of that is a woundedness. And so when that does fall apart, oh my gosh, the whole world falls apart. I actually remarked to somebody the other day, in particular when I was younger, in particular before the memoir of my book, the inciting incident I had on that cold November night in 2011, before that time period, I used to get insane post-production blues. And simply for the listeners, what a post-production blues thing is you grind so hard to get a job as an actor. And when you do get it, it's amazing. And you play. I mean, working as an actor on a movie or a TV, that's not work. That's the play part. The work part is going to the auditions, getting rejected over and over again. The grinding for learning lines, the grinding to develop your skill, all that stuff, the disappointments, the drafts, the whatevers, the acting bits, that's the jaw. Now it gets taken away from you. Now you're back to square one. Now you're reapplying for your job. It's like, imagine, people who've been in a job, say, for 10, 15 years, when they lose that job, it's devastating, right? Do that 10 times a year. All your life. That's how it feels, right? So I used to get insane post-production blues. But when the change came, when I realized it's not about me, I'm providing a service. My motto is when I go to work is not how good am I going to be. My motto is how well I'm going to love. That's what it's become. And so now, I just the other day, I thought about it, flip. I haven't really had post-production blues. And I've worked a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. And I just haven't had it. And I've realized it's because there's a whole shift in why am I doing it. I'm not doing it to have an identity or a value or a worth. Even though those things do attach themselves, but that's not the highest value. The highest value is to love well and to serve. And I'm not saying that that's easy and I get it right all the time, but I can tell from the fruit of my own heart, not having these post-production blues, that that's the shift that's taken place. Now I just want to get better at that and grow in it and, So yeah, I hope that answers.
Let's transition into Seven Laan. That's how I got to know you.
Okay.
Like, I got to know the Théâtre Blanche on screen. How did that shape you? I think that, when did that happen, in your 20s?
Yeah. So I was in my final year of my commerce degree. And what was interesting for me about that, why would I study a BCom degree if I'm involved in acting and stuff like that? I remember when I got back from Europe in 94, there was a very wise guy that I spoke to, and he said to me, look, there's 2 things I identified in your life that are lacking. One is there's a discipline that's lacking because you haven't applied yourself in school. And I know, I checked out when I was in sub A, which is when I was 6. So that's grade 1 for the Modern Oaks. And pretty much did not check in until I went to university. And the second thing is, he says, you haven't figured out your vocation. What are you supposed to do? So when I got back to South Africa, those are the 2 things I was like totally focused on. Was I need to go and study BCom, and I need to do it through NISA, because then I do it from home. Because at a university lecture hall, there's a whole audience that I'm going to find and perform to, and I'm going to copy everyone's notes. I'm like, so I have to study from home, which is what I ended up doing. And it was great because I got an A for the thing, whereas at school it wasn't so great. that developed in me a discipline that helped me learn lines. It helped me write a book. It helped me write screenplays. It just totally transformed me. So when I was in my final exam, I get this call from my agent saying, hey, there's a show, Laan, that's happening. Now, bearing in mind, nobody knew about it, didn't exist. I was like, what is this? You know, so I go to the audition, and I get there, and the producer says to me, read for Jan Hendrik, which is the brother. And I'm like, okay. So I don't know anything, so I just read for it anyway. But I read it off the page. You didn't prepare it. I prepared for Tian. Of course, I sucked so bad. She said, thank you very much. Bye-bye. And I said, whoa. I said, I actually came for Tian. And in her head, she said to me many years later, because we were talking about this audition, she said in her head she felt sorry for me because I'd driven so far, all the way from Durbanville to town. I remember still on Badengracht Street where the audition took place. She said, okay, now I'll just let him wait till the end and we can do a quick read and then he can go. And so she said to me, can you please wait till everybody's done then? So, okay, because she had no hope that I was going to do anything. So I sit at the back of the thing and everybody's coming through for the auditions, and it was all the different other different characters and stuff. Eventually, we're done, and it's late now. It's like 8:30 or something in the evening. And so she said, okay, cool, let's do you quickly. But the irony of ironies was, there was a line in that script that I'd been saying to my mom most of my life. Because my grandfather grew up, I think in the Cape or whatever, and when he was at university, his roommate was Anton Rupert. So they knew each other and they were friends for many years. And I eventually met him when he was, a lot older, and we used to holiday next to their house in Hermanus or whatever. So I knew them, and I always remembered my mom talking about the Ruperts and how wealthy they are and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, there was a line in there where Model says something to me about I need to behave or whatever, and I look at her and I go, kom nou maar, is nie asof jy Ruperts is nie. And I said this line with so much authenticity and heart, I could hear Annie look at the camera guy and go, hou die camera op hom. And when I heard that, boom, all the instincts just kicked in. I became not unconscious, like not self-conscious anymore. And I just had fun. And she said, literally, you walked out that door, and I phoned Don immediately. I said, we found out Tian. This kid's perfect for it. And yeah, that's how I got into Laan. It's bizarre these things work.
Yeah, it is bizarre because we just see the end result and we're like, it went the typical way you were called, did the audition and everything went fine and there you got it.
But a lot of the arts work like that. You see that with arts you can never bottle it, and that's the beauty of art. It's a mystery. You know what I mean? And I want to read you a beautiful quote that'll just really really kick it into gear of what the arts is and why it's so important.
I think to me what is interesting is that the arts is so much more like authentic and like dynamic in the sense of how opportunities come. Yeah. Where with corporate and normal career paths, it often happens in a very different way.
No, sure it does, yeah. It has its own way, but it happens in different ways. And I think one of there's this amazing lecturer, his name is Sir Ken Robinson. He's passed away now, but he was a specialist in Professor Ken Robinson in education. And he does this incredible lecture on how our education system currently is so messed up because it was designed in the Industrial Revolution 200 years, 300 years ago. And it was literally designed to churn out worker bees that can make the Industrial Revolution grow. So accountants, engineers, all of that stuff, scientists, all of that stuff was the important thing. The arts completely just got sidelined and killed. And just recently, one of our ministers made a faux pas and just basically just said, yeah, the arts aren't important. What we really need is engineers, mathematicians, blah, blah, blah. And people, just responded. And I responded with this quote to her. Because this is what happens, right? Is that when politicians start saying the arts is important, they kill it in schools, the first thing that goes is always arts. But this is what C.S. Lewis said. He said, friendship is unnecessary. Like philosophy, like art, like the universe itself, completely unnecessary. It has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things which give value to survival.
Wow.
Yeah. So you want to kill the meaning of life and joy and understanding, because the thing artists' jobs are to make things visible that are not visible. in a way that you can see. So I'm appreciative of all the other jobs. Of course, I'm not saying it's in lieu of, I'm saying it's both and. But if the money bags of the world can just understand how much value art has, not because it has value in and of itself, but because the value it creates gives meaning to your survival, gives meaning to why you do what you do, then I think we'll have a party.
And what would life be without the arts?
Yeah,
in any way,
100%,
shape, or form?
No, it'd be very bland and very no reason for survival. That's, if you think about that, right? If you think about it, it makes you think about wanting to survive. It makes you think about wanting to live for someone else or lay down your life for someone else. Maybe that's why we have so much greed in the world. It's because people are going, your art's not important. Having a heart is not important. Making more money is more important, whatever, or making everyone else pay so that I can have this brilliant lifestyle. Oh, great, now you're on your own. And now you have no reason for survival. It's funny, I think one of the first guys who made over $2 billion on the Bitcoin thing when it was going ballistic. At 64, I think, committed suicide. Maybe he had no reason for survival, because he lost his heart, so anyway.
What did it mean to you to be on screen every weeknight for the community of South Africa? Like, how did that change you? How did that shape you as a person, your career?
I think, twofold. I think on the one hand, I think for all of us, I can remember us as like a young gang of actors. It was exciting, it was fun. I think a lot of it, I had no idea how hard it can be an acting career, because it's pretty, I can say this now with authority looking back, it was a lot easier than I realized at the time. Here I am full-time employed as an actor. I'm working, I'm acting, I'm learning lines every day, and I'm getting to play every day, and I can buy a house, and I can pay for cars and go on holidays and I can do life, right? And it's like, no idea in what a privileged position I was. So on the one hand, it was like, I think we didn't quite know what we had until we lost it. But on the other hand, it was fun interacting. I loved interacting with the fans. I enjoyed it. I enjoy seeing how I affect other people. And I think especially with the character I played in Laan, Tiaan was this naughty but lovable character. And so whenever I was at some show or something where we were doing Laan promotions and whatever, I always enjoyed the older ladies coming up to me saying, listen, I just need you to have you under my roof for a week with my milk tart recipe, and I can fix you, bud. I can fix you. And then the fun part is I would play off that as my character Tiaan, because, they don't know who I am as a real person. They only know the character. And so I would have fun with the character Tiaan. And I think the joy it brought me was we entertained people. I think in South Africa at the time, we were a democracy for about 6 years at that point. 2000 was 6 years after the first free elections. But I certainly think, and when I say this, I mean it exactly how I say it, the Afrikaans population, which there is a lot of black-speaking Afrikaans people, colored-speaking Afrikaans people, white people, Afrikaans-speaking people, and they were all going, okay, where's our stuff? Because all of a sudden you've taken us off TV, you've taken us off, pretty much like that's the language of the oppressor. And it was like, certainly I think there was a lostness there, maybe. And then the show Laan comes along, who has black people, colored people, white people in it, and representing the Afrikaans-speaking communities across the board. And people went, oh, that's where we are. So they're just looking for family. They're not looking for some racist government to come back or whatever. It's just going like, where's our people? Who are the people that speak the language we speak? Where's the culture? Where are the people who... Because remember, Laan is about relationships, about loving and, getting married, getting divorced, whatever, cheating on, not cheating on, staying faithful, not, a doctor fixing a... It was just life, and I think part of the reason why it was popular, sure, we had Anna Mart and Wilna Snyman and Gijs de Villiers and Neil Sanders, Nika Panagis, all these really good actors who could contribute, Nina Swart, they could contribute to telling a story well, but I think it was more than that. It was a zeitgeist moment where there was a cultural moment where people went, yes, this is who my people are. This is where I can sit and have fun and engage with life. So I think that's what made Laan super popular.
I think there was a sense of relatability
Yeah.
because it was so diverse.
Yeah.
So you could literally. I remember there was a phase where there was a guy called Marco work in there.
Yes.
And I was like, can I relate to this character apart from his long
His
hair?
name, yeah,
and his charm?
Francois Lensley, yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting how you kind of see, because it's so natural. It
Yeah.
plays out in a coffee shop and in a hall and all of those things.
Yeah, yeah.
And you kind of relate to the
Yeah,
moment that you find
business
yourself
and
in there.
people's homes and whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
And old, young people, like the whole spiel.
Yeah, it's just a slice of life, you know, and I think that's what I meant early on with the arts. How many people worked in the corporate world that wanted to go home and watch Laan because we provided them with a moment of entertainment, a little bit of an escape from the realities and the harshness of things, you know, and then, you know, and then you influence people with a bit of entertainment.
I want to transition to Faith Like Potatoes.
Yes.
Um,
Face like a potato. That's why I got that job. I walked into the audition and went,
I
oh, he's
always
got a face
wondered,
like a
and now I
potato. Perfect.
Tell us how you got the gig. I remember reading in your book that you didn't actually audition for it, or there was a very interesting way that you got the gig.
Yeah, Lee and I were living in the US. I was trying to figure out Los Angeles, which is the hottest city I've ever lived in. It's a very crazy city. And yeah, I just got back from gym the one day, and Lee said, there's a message on your phone from a Kirsten or something, and they want you to shoot a movie in South Africa. I was like, oh, okay. So I phoned her, and she said, there's this movie we're doing called Faith Like Potatoes. And first of all, it was a weird name. I was like, okay. I said, okay, well, just send me the script. Let me just have a look at the script. And so she sent me the script. And I remember reading it, and yeah, it's been 17 years, so I can be straight up honest about the script. Wasn't wonderlijk. It was a little bit on the nose. I think that's the dialogue felt a little bit religious-y, but the story was good. And so I know from script writing, if you have a good story, you can always fix the script. If you have a bad story, you can't fix the script. There's no way. You can apply structure, you can do all the tricks that you do, but if you don't have a story, you don't have a story. But they had a story. I think Angus's story was pretty incredible, and I think the part that really caught me was, yes, he had these amazing life transformational miracles happen, and his life changed and everything, but when little Alistair passes away, and he's standing in that field and he's going, I'll give you the clothes of my back, just please, and nothing. That's when I thought, this faith is now faith like potatoes. It's real, because at the end of the movie, he says, your faith has got to be tangible, it's got to be real, you've got to smell it, you've got to feel it. And I went, that is congruent to my experience of having a faith walk. And it literally is based on that scene that I said, okay, we can do this, you know. So I phoned them back and I said, look, where we at? And they said, no, we're offering you the role. So I said, okay, cool. And then, yeah, we just had to work out the logistics of a contract and all that sort of stuff. But then when I did talk to them about it, I said, look, this is like 2 weeks before we start shooting. Why did you actually wait so long? They're like, no, we've spent like months and months and months auditioning the character. We just haven't found anyone. And then Richard, the director, was walking in his apartment one day and was like, Lord, what's happening? Like, we have to cast this role. And he said, then my name just dropped into his heart and he went, done, sorted. And yeah, I mean, and I was a bit of an unknown entity at that point for Richard. You know, I'd been Tian on Laan. But we had met once before. He understood my passion for faith and where I was at, you know, in terms of faith walk and stuff. And so he's like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it, you know. And then the first day I met Angus, he looked me straight in the eye, and literally almost the first words out of his mouth other than hello was, my boy, if you're going to play me in the movie, the Lord's going to take you through fire.
Sure.
And I was like, what? And he said, you know, because he's like, yeah, I've been through stuff, you know, and if you're going to be like that, it's going to be stuff, you know. And so I wasn't really sure what he meant with that, you know, at the beginning. But then basically the next 9 years of my life burned down, you know. So yeah, I don't think it was like a bad thing he said to me. I think it was actually the truth, you know, because when Jesus meets us and he says, oh, if you're going to follow me, you have to die to yourself. It's just another way of saying, I'm going to take you through fire. You know, another way of saying, I'm going to take you from Egypt to the promised land, but there's a desert in between. You know, I'm going to take you through the wilderness. It's all these analogies, crucible of fire, whatever. So yeah, that's kind of like my beginnings of how I got into Faith Like Potatoes.
Is there anything specifically that you learned from your role playing in Faith Like Potatoes?
Nothing But it's funny, people often ask me like, oh, how did it change your life? I'm like, because it changes their lives watching the movie. I mean, I remember there's one guy I met, he said at the time, he was living in Pretoria, and I'm coming back to answering that question, but just by way of this example, he was somewhere in Centurion. He's a friend now. And he said, I was sitting there, my life was pretty much in a mess. I was in a relationship I shouldn't have been in, and I wasn't a Christian or anything, and I was drinking a lot, and life was crazy and messy. And it's in this movie comes on TV, and it says it's Faith Like Potatoes. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll watch it, I'm bored. He said eventually I cried so hard, I hid under my duvet to hide myself from myself. I was so embarrassed by how much I cried and how much this movie touched me.
Sure.
So when people tell me experiences like that, it makes me realize, gosh, it's very different watching the movie than making the movie. So my experience was that of making the movie. My watching experience wasn't so much watching it myself, it was watching the audience when we would present the movie. So every time, we could watch that movie 25 times in a row, but every time there's a new audience, it's a new experience for me. Because every audience member brings a different life there, and that life gets influenced. But the making of the movie, I was just learning lines, changing lines. I think for me, what was really important in the movie is that when I did preach as Angus in the movie or pray as Angus in the movie, I imagined real people. And so I asked God to help me do that, I was a rookie, for sure, in terms of my experience, but certainly I think God gave me a gift for this thing. And certainly I could fall back on that. I fell back on my own faith life. So I can't really say that the movie in and of itself was this experience that changed me from a non-Christian to a Christian or something like that, because already I was at Bible college in 92, 93. The movie's 2006, so I was like maybe 12, 13 years already, like really wanting to follow the Lord. It's the years post the movie that really was the things that changed me,
Let's talk about that.
Sure, 100%.
Because reading the book, those
to Los Angeles.
those few years sound quite exciting, but daunting and
adventurous,
tough,
I'd say.
and adventurous and everything in one. I want to start by why you and Lee moved to LA.
To LA.
And then transition into just what those first years look like. Because I think every South African that considers migrating has this expectation of what it looks on the other side. And what we often found 2 years in, that is not necessarily the case. So what was your experience?
No one, in my experience anyways, no one or very few people, let's put it that way, have worst case scenarios in their head. They only have best case scenarios in their head. I mean, I literally recently spoke to a 28-year-old or whatever, I think she's 28 or 29-year-old, and she's moving to Dubai, and she's going to become a millionaire. That's basically what I've understood.
According to her.
I'm just not going to say anything. I was like, I'll be here when you get back, or when you want to talk. But so my experience of moving to LA was, the reason why we moved to LA was, it was 2005, and through 2002, 2003, 2004, I was doing well at Laan, but there's a shelf life for being in a soap as an artist, because you eventually just become grooved in that you develop bad habits because you never have to do anything new. You're just playing the same character over and over again, and the same storylines over and over again. So if you want to grow as an artist, it's at some point, there's a sell-by date and you need to move on. Unless, of course, you're going, I'm happy with that, and I want to just keep doing this because it's a great salary, and there's nothing wrong if you stay there for 20 years. I'm talking about me specifically, and I wanted to grow. I felt like I had more to give. And for me, I wanted to make movies, because in my immaturity and narcissistic view of the world, I thought to myself, if I'm a movie star, I will have way more value and influence, and people respect me better. Then these wounds that chew at me all day will be quiet, not knowing that they'll be louder. And so I was like, Hollywood is it, because why not? And you have to win an Oscar. Okay. I'd missed the interview that Matt Damon had, when he said, when I won an Oscar at the age of 27, it was either that night or the next night, he sat on his bed in his room with his Oscar in his hand. And he said, I got this sick feeling in my heart because I realized now that it's happened, it feels pretty empty. And what if I'd spent my whole life until the age of 80 breaking myself to win this thing only to find it out then? And he said it really messed with him. And so I had none of that in my head. I'm gunning for this thing. And at the time in South Africa, nothing was growing fast enough. All the best actors, the Anna Martens and the Vilnas and whatever, they're all doing soaps because why? There was nothing else. It literally was almost at the time when I left that they started making Afrikaans movies and Cake Net and Silver Scaramfeest and all that stuff was happening. But nothing else, and I was so frustrated. And I was like, well, where are they making movies? I mean, I even flew to Australia and met with an agent there, and he was like, yeah, well, the Australians are going to America. So I was like, well, then that's what I've got to do. So that was the motivation, was to go to America. All the underlying things, that only comes out later, but the basic motivation was I need to go to the US to go and make movies. That's how you make it. You go to the US, you do sholies, basically. And so, yeah, we did a scouting trip in 2005 and met with a producer, and he said, well, you want to make it in America, you got to move here. I said, okay, can you introduce me to an agent? He's like, yeah, I'm buddies with the guys at Mullen Morris Endeavor, biggest agents in the world. And I said, great, can you introduce me? He's like, no. Why? He says, no one knows who you are. But I did see him a lot. And he's like, what, is that German? That's what they're going to say. And so I had no concept. I had no idea how LA worked and how hard people work, how hard they fight to get anywhere there. And then it doesn't even pay off. And sometimes someone shows up and they're just the right person for the role, and then all of a sudden they're Ashton Kutcher. I mean, it's literally what happened here. You know, so it's such an anomaly that the way people make it. It's just so random. It's crazy. But yeah, that was the bottom line of why, the original reason why we went to LA. It's not because we didn't like South Africa. It's not because, I mean, I will say this, is that I did realize that in South Africa they don't pay us royalties. You can't have equity in the stuff that you actually contributing equity to, which is, it's legal because it's the law, but it's not just. You know, love to go to the big companies of this country and go, hey, by the way, everyone, you're no longer getting equity. How does that sit with you? We'll have a war. You know, guess what? We've always been working like that, and it's not right. It's not equitable, because in Australia, New Zealand, England, all the big producers of movies in America, certainly, everybody shares in the equity, except So yeah, that was one of the other reasons. I think part of it was a lot of the institutions in Africa, in particular the SABC, which is supposed to be our premier. I mean, they don't have any competition, and yet, the mess it was and was just so infuriating as an actor and as a performer, as a producer. You know, it's just really hard that that it is what it is. So all that stuff was, it influences.
You talk about the cold November night in 2011 in your book. Tell us about that. That's when you've been in America for 6 years?
Yeah.
Give or take?
Yeah, 6.
So invite us into that night. What happened and how your life changed from that point forward?
I woke up because I was having a nightmare. And when I was awake, I could feel pins and needles running down the side of my face. And I realized I was out of breath, felt like I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm having a panic attack, not just a nightmare. And in my sort of panic of the moment, because I've had those on an airplane because I get claustrophobic, and especially when life gets really hard or when it really got confusing, and I think it was one day I was sitting on a plane and I realized I'm not in control of anything. I'm not flying this plane. I don't know where. I can't say when it's going to land. I can't open the door. Nothing. And it just that hit me. But it's because the underlying part of my life was like that. And ironically, the very thing that should have made me feel perfect peace, because that's the moment I should have gone, oh, it's because God is fully in control and I'm nothing in control, or I'm in control of nothing. Instead, it gave me almost a heart attack. And I literally sit back, Leah, to grab my arm and calm me down. Because at that point, I came into contact, whichever human being has to come into contact with, is first thing, I had a self-salvation project going. And I was using God to help me save myself, or anything for that matter. And secondly, only God can save. But I couldn't articulate it. It was just panic. But on that cold November night, it came back in the hardest way that I couldn't deny it. I felt like I was cornered, and whoever it was who was cornering me was picking a fight with me. It was like, tonight you're not leaving. Tonight you have no escape. Tonight we're going to have this out. The man came down to wrestle with me. Yeah, that's how Jacob describes it. There was this man who wrestled with me all night. And I wrestled. And I realized in the wrestling that everything I'd done in my 20s and 30s that had driven me to find my ultimate progress, to find my ultimate value, identity, and worth, to heal my wounds, my self-salvation project, had failed, utterly failed. I went to another room to pray. When my knees hit the ground, I was bitter and angry, and I started accusing God of failing me, of failing my self-salvation project. I didn't put it that way. I said, basically, if anyone looks at my life now, it'd be a complete embarrassment. And we had hard stuff. We'd lost babies in pregnancy, 4 of them. We lost all our money. My career was in the tank, even though I was with the best agents in the world. I'd auditioned for Superman, had a callback for the role of Superman in Man of Steel. And I don't for one second think that I should have done it more than Henry Cavill. I think he was perfect for it. But the point is, when you're in that audition stage, you still have hope. And especially when you get a callback, you go, oh my word, I was at Warner Brothers at Legendary Pictures. And the director, Zack Snyder, must have seen this, and now he wants to see me again. I'm like, wow, there's got to be weight there. So all of that stuff plays in your head, and now it's all gone. And now you're going, God, I did what I had to do. I kept the rules. I mean, my word, I so didn't. But in my mind, I did. And I'm like, you didn't do your part. And I'm mad at you because I have no evidence that you're in my life. I can't say to people, look there, that's God in my life. Which is so short-sighted when I think back of it now, because I was still breathing. And that's a lot of evidence that God's still in your life if you're breathing, because it's His breath. We just don't know it, that it's His breath. Anyway, got up after a couple of hours of wrestling and didn't hear anything. I went to bed, opened my iPad to read something so I could fall asleep. And the first lines I read from a book that I'd been reading, and just opened where the last place was I was reading. And it said this: if God did not spare His own Son, whom He loved and in whom He was well pleased from the wilderness, why in the world would He spare you from it? That information went straight over my head. I was like, okay, but why? And then a week later, we were at a friend's house, and there was this gifted pastor and his fellow minister who was quite gifted in the prophetic, prayed for a few people, and then prayed for my wife and I. And specifically, he took us on about our marriage has a wall in between the two of us. Now, he said this. He said, there's a wall between the two of you in your marriage. Now, he doesn't know anything about us. We've never met this. Like, we don't know who he is. He doesn't know anything about me. He didn't know anything about Faith with Potatoes and nothing. And he says this. It's like he looks at us and he sees it. And he was right. Because at that point, we'd gone through so much heartache and disappointments and everything that what happens is you go, okay, I cannot do love out, because love out means hurt in, and I'm done with that. So I'm just going to isolate. And when you isolate, you lose intimacy. And the minute you lose intimacy, a wall builds between the two of you. And what happens is, every day, life will present you with bricks. Every day, it's just normal. That's part of life. It's brokenness of life. It's reality of life. The devil hates you. You're broken, and the world's messed up. And bricks come your way. You can grow by dealing with those bricks, praying through them, talking through them, go to therapy, whatever you need to do to deal with the bricks and keep the wall down, or the wall will just build. It's your choice. Unfortunately, the walls do build, and that's when affairs happen, and that's when marriages fall apart and stuff like that. Everybody's vulnerable. There's no such thing as a foolproof, strong marriage kind of thing. That's either you at it, working at it, or you're not. And it's always like it never settles. The fight to shape your heart with the truth that your mind knows is an ongoing battle all the time. It never stops. That's why God gives us His Spirit. That's why He gives us His Word. That's why we do this on a daily basis. So that was part of that first part of the word, this guy. And then he turned to me and he said, and I see these scenarios play themselves out. Look, I took God on that cold November night. I told Him, I gave Him a piece of my mind and my heart, of what I thought of what had happened. He was now flipping the camera of the movie of my life, and he's showing me the picture from his point of view. And the first thing he says, yeah, you've screwed up in your marriage department. I understand why, but you made a fleshly choice, not a spirit choice. Secondly, you are this bullet point guy. You ask questions. You want to answer straight away. If you don't get an answer, you'll volunteer an answer before that person even has time to think. And then he said, and you constantly interrupt your wife. I see these scenarios play themselves out, and I want you to know you've damaged the heart of your wife. And the Lord says, you need to stop that. I look at Lee. She's literally crying a puddle. She's in Afrikaans, beautiful word, say snik. And you know what this guy says to her? That's right, sister. Let the hurt come out. Oh my gosh. I sit there and I'm like, oh man. I've broken another person. How the heck? And I don't even know. Doesn't exonerate me in any way, shape, or form. And because I didn't listen. How shallow am I? When God shows you your heart, be sure to know He's built the scaffolding of His love around you, because when He does, it's going to be very, very painful. Because it's going to be truthful, but it's also going to be loving, but it's going to be truthful. And I realized, oh, wow. Because here's the thing about listening. It's not just keeping quiet so the other person can speak. It's keeping quiet in your head and not formulating answers before they finish speaking. But most importantly, and I say this to Oaks all the time, it's creating an environment that feels safe enough for her to say what she needs to say. That's also listening. Because you can keep quiet, but sit there with a scowl in your eyes, and she just is not going to tell you what's really going on. So Lee and I have this concept that we developed out of that time, and it's called the grace box. And the grace box is this. You have the grace to say what you need to say, and then we'll fix it. Whatever you need to say. But say it. You're not going to get judged. Even if you say, I'm really attracted to another person and I don't know what to do. Or I really attract another person and I want to be, but help me. God gives us the grace box. Jesus, I really want to sin today. Or I really want to just go down the wrong road, but help me. It's like Teresa of Avila. She said, God, I don't love you. I don't even want to love you. But I want to love you. Help me. That's the grace box. And so that's what came out of that. And then he says to me, look, God's opened doors for you before. And up to that point, I had like a 20-year run of success. I mean, it wasn't always easy, but it went from a movie in England to a successful modeling thing and tons of commercials, and then Laan, then Faith Like Potatoes, Hansie, Bang Bang Club, William Morris Endeavour, biggest agents in the world, and then boom, it just all died. Complete dead end. And he says, the Lord's opened doors for you before, but then the doors started to shut, and He wants you to know the reason why He shut them is because your heart's not surrendered and you've not been willing to pay the price. Now, at that point, I'd been a Christian 20 years. And the first thing that went through my head was, I know He's right, I just don't know how He's right. No idea how He's right. Because if I knew, I wouldn't have been that way. And then He said to me, between 2012 and 2014, I will restore your voice. I'll give you a voice. This is what I spoke about earlier. And that'll elevate you back up into your industry. But this is a prophetic warning. It's a make or break scenario for you. Either surrender or forget it. And I remember going home very silently and very shocked. And for the next 3 weeks, my heart was in a complete funk of trying to self-fix. Because that's all I knew up to that point was self-salvation. Even though He'd saved me, I still thought I needed to do extra to save me. I didn't open my heart to Him for Him to give me value and worth and healing. It's just this like, okay, you're the tools now, I've got to do it myself kind of thing. And that's when I read the book Counterfeit Gods. And that's when I found out how it was true. And it was simply this: our hearts attach ourselves to created things like money, jobs, work, success. Anything you can think of that's been created can become an idol. They're not bad things. They're the very good things of life, like children or like money or whatever. But the minute the love in your heart for that thing that's been created becomes more than your love for God, it becomes an idol, becomes a false god. And when, I think it's the third commandment, when it says, thou shalt not worship false gods, either heaven and earth or the earth below, blah, blah, all that stuff. I recently read a commentary where the theologian expounds on that, and he says what that scripture means is you won't just worship false gods, but you won't worship God falsely, because both are idolatry. Because when you worship God falsely, you have created a God in your mind that is false, but you're putting God's image on it, and that's not right either. So the prodigal younger son, he worships idols, because he goes and he says, a bad life will give me joy. It'll give me the inheritance I want. I want God's stuff, but I'm going to break all the rules doing it. The older son worships God falsely, because he says, I want the dad's stuff and I will work for it. I will keep the rules. And Paul in Galatians 5 verse 6 says this in the Message. I love that translation, because it says, neither your most conscientious religious observance nor your complete disregard of it. So prodigal older son, prodigal younger son amounts to anything. What matters is your faith expressing itself through love. So what Paul is not saying, oh, you need to throw all religion out the door, you need to throw all God's Bible out the door because you just got to love. That's not what he's saying. He's saying when you understand who God is, because Jesus said, those who obey my commands are the ones who love me. So you're driven by love for him more than you are driven by love for money or career or whatever. So those things are influenced by your love and your relationship with God, and that's your faith expressing itself through love in those careers and those jobs. And what I understood from Counterfeit Gods was I wasn't doing that. So how did I discover it? He said, is there anything in your life more important than God? I said, no. Okay. Is there anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God does? I said, no. He said, is there anything in your life that gives you what only God can give you? Now, I understood it as, yeah, well, I ask God for my needs. But what he meant was, is there anything in your life that gives you worth, value, and purpose in life more than God? In other words, is there anything you say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, then my life will have meaning? I said, no, there's nothing like that, I don't think. But then he asked the question, is there anything in your life, should you lose it, your life wouldn't have any value? Because whatever that is your functional God. That's the functional trust of your heart. And all of a sudden, I remembered that night in November, and I realized the very essence of that night was my life did not feel like it was worth living anymore. I'm not talking about not committing suicide. I'm talking about I didn't want to make an effort anymore. I was like, this is pointless, trying. Just do whatever you feel like doing. Because what's the point? It's just a crapshoot. No one's going anywhere here. And that's the idols that made me feel that way, because I didn't get what I wanted, right? And then I realized not only was I an idolater from the point of view of having idols in my life, like career success, Hollywood, making it in movies, whatever it was. On the other side, I was worshiping God falsely, because imagine if my wife, Lee, her name's Lee, she comes to me after we married now 27 years, and she says to me, listen, babe, I found this other guy. I love you. I mean, I want you to be in my life. I want to use all your resources. I still want you to be present with everything you bring, but I want you to help me have an affair with him, because then my life will be happy. Then I'll have meaning. And God was like, that's what you guys do to me. That's how you live with. That's how you worship me falsely. How many times did you not stand in church with your hands lifted to me saying, please help me worship my idol better? Please help me have an affair with the idol, because then you'll feel like you have value with and purpose in life. Dude, I mean, I had no leg to stand on. I mean, even if I did have a leg to stand on, it was God's leg. You know, I had no comeback. Nothing. And I didn't want to have a comeback. And so what happened then? Well, I thought, okay, between 2012 and 2014, you're going to restore my voice. And I was like, okay, cool. I can go back. I'll be a lot humbler, but I can go back to movies. And I was like, no, why would we do that? No, it's the only door that opened for me, and I can say this now in hindsight. I mean, at the time, I was just scrambling, trying to figure it out. But the only door that opened for me was to become a cab driver and work for a 6'8", 25-year-old Serbian who owned the cab company because he made money playing basketball. And so he owned the cab company, and his cocky 25-year-old American friend was the other boss. And here I am, 40-year-old, just turned 40, and I'm working for these two oaks, driving a cab in LA. I ended up doing it for 3 years, not for them all the time. I ended up doing Uber and limos and all that stuff. But for 3 years, I drove this cab. And I realized I think it was like my first week of cab driving, I can remember, what I do remember is I was on Lincoln Boulevard driving towards the airport, and I clearly heard what I believe is God's voice in my heart. And he said to me, you came to the city to take from it. I want you to serve the city. It's the only way we're going to get rid of the idolatry of your heart. It's the only way we're going to get rid of John and James's mistake of you want to lord it over other people. Because trust me, you didn't know that, but I'm telling you that was in your heart. And I went, yep, you're right. I just wanted to have what every other person in LA has, which is stuff you money. In other words, you can't tell me yes or no. I'll do what I want, money. And that's the issue, and I looked at that and I went, wow. So you saying the difference between me and the worldly oaks coming to Los Angeles was just that my hypocrisy was more disguised than my religion. Yep. You just had a facade about you. And then when you didn't get the fattened calf, you moaned at me for not getting a goat. And I'm going, yeah, but you don't know me, because if you did know me, you knew that everything is yours. You know what I'm saying? So because of that, you can have peace. You don't have to have post-production blues. But you can let go of it, because you know that I'm your source. I'm the source of everything for you. Identity, worth, value, purpose, provision, the whole nine. And then you can go there. And you don't have to be the bookman. You can just serve everybody. Because if they look good, trust me, you'll look good anyways. It's not about you diminishing others so that you can have it all. Diminish yourself to give them it all, because that's the greatest way. I mean, look at the heart of our faith is Jesus. He is God. He in Philippians 2, he put aside that, came down to earth, put on the clothing of a man, humbled himself to the death of a cross. Now, unless you've studied in theology or whatever, or studied the Bible a bit with comments and stuff, you wouldn't understand that in that culture, in Roman culture, a cross execution was only reserved for the lowest of the low, murderers, the maximum security prison guys. Noble people, middle class people, citizens of Rome, never, ever got the cross. But we are talking about the Son of God, the Holy One. He made the wood that the cross was made out of. The metal that the nails were made out of, he put that in the mines. The people that crucified, he made them. He knows them, Psalm 139, inside and out. He knit them together in their mother's wombs. His word holds the universe together. Check this out. The earth to the sun is 96 million miles. If you reduce that distance to a piece of paper, the distance from here, Earth, to the nearest star is 70 feet high of those papers. That's can you imagine? 96 million miles is one piece of paper. 70 feet of those papers. That's the nearest star. Okay? Our galaxy, which that nearest star is in, the diameter of our galaxy, those papers would be 310 miles, 550 kilometers pile high of papers. The atmosphere is, 80 k's away? Or I think it's about 80 k's away. Or not even. No, the atmosphere is like 40 or 50 k's away or something. 550 k's would be the diameter. Now, we are a speck, our galaxy, the Milky Way, is a speck amongst all the other billions of galaxies in the universe. Now, it says in Hebrews 1, he holds all of that together with the word of his power. That person humbles himself, lives in this pigsty that we've created to love us. You don't argue with that. He doesn't pull into your life as an assistant, is what this preacher said. He's not your butler that you flick your fingers to. I learned all of that. The beginnings of that. And now I want to spend the rest of my life getting to understand that better, understanding that perspective better. And like I've said to you in other conversations, that the greatest pursuit you can make in your life is to get to know God. You will be astounded at what you find. You will absolutely be astounded at what you find. And that to me is what that cold November night signifies. My trip to LA, what did I get from it? This is what I got from it. I remember the other night speaking to a bunch of men. In 1992, I was in this competition in London. It was a modeling competition. I can't go into the whole story now because of time, of how I got into the competition, but I got in a bizarre way where God opened a door where the closing date for this thing was like 2 months before. But these people liked my picture so much, they entered me anyways. Out of 21,000 people, I ended up in the top 6. On TV in Britain, excuse me, on TV in Britain, and there were celebrities. We went in Covent Garden, stayed in this cool hotel, designer haircuts, the whole nine. And God had clearly just opened the door for me. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm a Bible college student. I need money. And it's £2,500 prize money and a year's contract with the agent. And they announced third place. They announced second place. It's not me. It's not me. Yeah. I'm getting ready for this. And they announced first place. What? It's not me. I'm like, God, what? He took me this whole journey. And I mean, like I said, if I told the story, you'd understand. It's a whole journey and how he got me there and everything. And I don't, what? And it went nowhere. It was a complete dead end. But I remember just before that, I just started Bible college, and there was this old-time missionary, George Verve. He actually died this year, but he was like in the hardest countries in the world, evangelizing and doing his thing. And he said this, he said, God has the sovereignty to allow you to go down dead ends. And I remember at the time sitting there thinking to myself, that's unfair. Are you kidding me? Like, if I'm going to get involved, you better make it happen and worth my while kind of thing. And that's just a young, immature me speaking. But the reality is, if you read the Bible, God is driven by his love for us. And it's his love that takes us into dead ends so that our hearts can be exposed to us. That's what a wilderness experience is. 20 years later, in 2011, the biggest door opens for me with this massive agent. I have access to all the best auditions in the world. I'm like literally land one of those gigs and my life's changed. Nothing happens. It's a complete dead end. A complete dead end. And I said to these guys, you know what? Those two incidences could have totally changed my life. The one as a model in Europe, the other one as an actor in Hollywood, Los Angeles. And both of those that looked like the biggest regresses in my life, the biggest missed opportunities in my life, were actually the biggest moments of progress in my life. Because both of those resulted in me getting to know God better and knocking my idolatry on the head and the general sin of my heart. And I said to them, why is that possible? Because Jesus hit the biggest dead end of everybody. His cross literally was a dead end. And he paid that price so that we can go into dead ends and come out redeemed and not dead. Because redemption is not scrapping that which is there and starting over again, as if that which is there is a mess to begin with. But rather, it's setting at liberty that which became enslaved. So God's process of redemption in my life and all these things I've said now comes down to this. I love you. You were in Egypt. You had like slavery habits. You were enslaved to your idolatry and your sin. I put you in the desert, not because I don't love you, but because it's in the desert that I exposed to you the general sin of your heart and the specific idolatry of your heart, so that I can set you free, so that you can go and live and be free.
What is interesting
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. That was a world of wisdom. What is interesting to me, or what I want to try and understand, is why does God take us on this journey? Why did it take that moment with you and Lee and that prophetic word? Why did it take you to lose kind of everything to get to the bottom, to change direction? Because like we said, in terms of progress, like we have to move in the right direction. You can't just continue in the wrong direction and think it's progress. But why does it take so much pain, hurt? And you can see it all across through the Bible. So it's not a modern thing, but like it's so difficult for us because, like you said, you were a Christian, you were following the way that you should. You maybe there was some obedience stuff that we all struggle with, but like it took that heart-wrenching moment of seeing your wife cry next to you and feeling that lowest that you can in terms of the person that you hurt and the lack of life that you've lived up until that point, to get you to surrender, to understand, to believe, to capture, and then live out in obedience to that. And that is tough for me to understand. It makes a lot of sense, but it's
get your head around it.
It makes so, because it also equips us for what comes. Like I think we wouldn't have had the tools and the truth and the knowledge awaken in us through the Spirit if we didn't go through those things. But it doesn't make it easier.
No, it doesn't. So a couple of things I would say. First thing is, we totally underestimate how broken we are. We totally underestimate how unable we are to save ourselves. Completely underestimated. We come with the assumption that if I just try hard enough, or if I'm just obedient enough, I can avoid it. I remember telling my story recently, about a year ago, to this guy, and then he texted me afterwards and he says, "Oh man, I went and listened to one of your talks online on YouTube or whatever, and just want to thank you for shaving 10 years off my desert journey." And I was like, you missed the point.
That's not how it works.
The information wasn't to shave time off your desert journey, because that's going to be your desert journey anyway. It was to help you when you are in the desert to get through it. Okay. So that's the first thing. We underestimate our position in this whole context. Okay. The second thing I will say is Hebrews 5 verse 8 says, although he was the son, he learned obedience by what he suffered. Okay. Let me break that down. It's not because Jesus didn't know obedience and had to suffer in order to learn it. He remained obedient in spite of the suffering. And that's where he found a pathway, or that's where he created a pathway for us. That's where he asserted his authority. And so what he's saying to us is, when you're going through suffering, remain obedient, because that's where you'll find your voice. And it follows on the first point I made. If you're broken, God doesn't come in with a magic wand and just go, poof, gone. Because what transformation's taken place? If you're broken, he'll walk you through that brokenness again. But this time with Jesus, who brought healing all along as he walked. Remember what he did. If you were a leper and you came into his presence, you left healed. If you were blind, you left seeing. If you were deaf, you left hearing. That's what he said. I'm anointed to do that. And so when you look at Peter betrays him 3 times. And I recently read in a book, it's called The Prodigal Prophet. Tim Keller actually wrote the book. And in there he said something so profound, because it really gave me an understanding and insight into this question very much you're asking. And he said this: when Peter betrayed Jesus, what became obvious was that Peter, who promised Jesus that over his dead body, his own dead body, Peter's own dead body, Jesus won't go to the cross. I'll die for you, Jesus. That guy betrayed him like this to a young girl who's a servant girl. So not even someone with massive authority or whatever. I mean, servant girl, what can she do to Peter? She probably slap her once and it's done.
Throw him in a well.
Yeah. So he said this. He says Peter had way more confidence and trust in his ability to follow Jesus than he had in Jesus' ability to love him. We have way more trust in our ability to try and work out our own salvation than we have in Jesus' ability to work out our salvation. Okay? So, but now you got to see, after the resurrection, Jesus meets them on the beach, busy cooking for them, and he looks at Peter and says, "Do you love me?" What's Jesus doing there? He's taking Peter back to the betrayal. He's taking him back to his brokenness. He's taking him back to his false theology. He's taking him back to, you had too much confidence in yourself. You should have no confidence in yourself. You should have confidence in me. Then you will have real confidence. Because your trust is not based on your ability to make it. Your trust is based on my ability to love you. So he has to take him back there. And that's what I'm saying. So these three things all work together. They're not like 1 point follows the other. They're all working at the same time all together. Because we have way too much confidence in our ability to fix ourselves, which we can't. We underestimate how broken we are. And we underestimate God's ability to work in us. And so that's why we go through these processes. Because how else are we going to deal with a broken heart? Like when you think of an operation, they don't just throw magic juice on it. They literally cut you open. They take your heart out. They cut you some more. They go in there and they fix it. And then they stitch you up. And then you have a period of healing. It is just where we're at because we are broken. The devil hates us and we live in a broken world. That's a good theological understanding to have of the condition of things. Because if you look at that condition of things, you'll be open to what I've just said. That, and here's the thing, God takes no pleasure from your suffering. Zero. He takes no pleasure from it. That's why he builds this love around you in order for you to manage to get through that suffering. And then he still carries you. You know, when I look at those 5 years, because after I was a cab driver, I still worked as a janitor for 2 years. So he stripped me of everything in the prime of my life, from the age of 40 to 45. I stripped of all of my previous so-called glory. It's all gone. But it was in that period he gave me an identity. It's in him. That's why, Flip, I've had people from very known magazines say, how can you tell this story? Isn't it embarrassing? I'm like, no, it's the flippant opposite of embarrassing. It's joyful for me. I'm going, yeah, all my BS is like just being clapped in the face. I'm like, what, why should I pretend? I spent my life pretending. Why should I pretend now? I want to brag about this because it's about his work in me, not about me being able to. I'm bragging about how unable I am and how able he is, and I want to shout it from the rooftops. Yeah, Paul says, I consider it manure, man. Like if you look at Philippians 4, right? Philippians, the 4 chapters. You look at chapter 1, it's 1 verse 6. He says, he is faithful and able to complete the work he started in you. Like that's how Paul kicks off. He says, guys, he started working in you. He's able to do it. Okay, what did he start doing? Well, Philippians 2, he put aside his godness, came down to earth, lived your life you should have lived, died the death you should have died. God exalted him to the highest of heavens. Therefore, now that's why, therefore work out your salvation. He's not saying work for your salvation. He says work it out. You've been given it for free. No work on your part. Now take that which has been given to you and work it out as God wills. So he's still involved in the process. As he wills to work it out in you. Don't be grumpy like the oaks in the desert. Right? And then we get to Philippians 3 and he says, everything that I used to do to self-salvate myself, the religious stuff I did, Israelite, circumcised on the 8th day, he says, I literally consider it manure, dog crap. That is how I consider it manure for the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. I want to know him in his suffering so that I can know him in his resurrection. Jesus said, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and it dies, it can't bear fruit. Unless Frank died to the false version of what Frank was, useless to me. And Paul says that's the journey I want to go on. And then he carries on towards the end of chapter 3 and says, I want to take hold of that for which heaven took hold of me. And then he gives you the tools. He says, man, rejoice. And again, I say rejoice in chapter 4. And if you're anxious, come to me. Pray, ask for wisdom. Bring petitions. Engage with me. Don't be indifferent. I know it's a very cursory reading of the 4 chapters of Philippians, but there it is. There's a story. I'm committed to starting a work in you, and I'm committed to finishing it. This is how. The essence of it is my son. Now work it out. And consider whatever you've done before nonsense. But join me in this journey. Take hold of that for which I took hold of you. And pray. Don't be anxious. I'm with you. Rhubars to help you solidify things,
If with what you just said, and all the work that has been done in you in the last couple of years, And to refer back to the title of your book is, do you now feel that you live a life that's worth living?
I'll put it this way. Thomas Cranmer, 15th century theologian, and it's a quote from the book. I think it's at the beginning of the book, because it sums it up completely, and it'll answer your question. He said this. He says, God's love. Now that, and I'm putting this in brackets now, that's the love that'll die for you, that I just spoke about in Philippians. That's the love that will literally put aside. I mean, who in this world do you know that will literally take all of their life's work and just give it to you? Okay? Now that is like not even a speck in the universe in comparison to what God gave up for you. Literally gave it up for you. And then on top of that, died for you. Do you know what He's done for you? That love will take you on a journey you do not wish to go, will make you travel by a road you do not wish to use. Those will be hard roads, maybe, but they'll be good roads. There'll be unsafe journeys, but they'll be good journeys. Okay? God's love will take you on journeys you do not wish to go, make you travel by roads you do not wish to use, in order to take you to a place you never wish to leave. He's driven by His love. He knows what you... Because I would never have picked cab driving to find my voice as an artist or as a human being. Never in a million years. I wouldn't have worked as a janitor. And it's ironic that I was a cab driver because I drove the roads of LA. Literally more than close to 200,000 miles. Every day, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. All over LA. Constantly in traffic. Never have picked that. But here's the thing. What is the place I don't want to leave? Knowing Him. It's not money. It's not a thing. It's not a career. It's not nothing. It's I know Him. He's my refuge. He's my safe place. That's the place I never want to leave. That's home. That's why my book's called The Vagabond, because a vagabond has a house, but they don't have a home. They have a vocation, or they have a job, but they don't have a calling. They don't have a vocation. They don't have a reason for. And so in Him, you have a home. In Him, you have a reason for. And it's for His glory and for your good. You know, so that, I hope that answers your question. Like, yeah, I can't unsee it. And I don't want to leave it. And I pray. Every day I pray. Lead me not in temptation, but deliver me from evil. Every day I pray, help me see. Every day I pray, You're my Father. Your Son made it possible. Your name be hallowed. I understand where we are. I want Your will to be done, Your kingdom to come on this earth. And then I expound on what that means in this particular moment or whatever. You are my resource. I ask You for daily bread. Not my abilities, not any producer, not any agent. Nobody is in that position. God is. Yes, He uses all of them. That's what they don't know. That's what you maybe don't know. Is that He uses, like He literally sets the circumstances of life. You know? God picked who was in that competition that I didn't come first in. If you came first in a race and you're full of yourself about it, He could have picked 50 other people to win that race. You could have come 50th. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you didn't determine when you were born. I certainly can't remember having a meeting about where I was going to be born.
And where.
Or when. Right? Or what I was going to look like. What color of my eyes were. Who my parents would be. Where it would be. Who would be in my school teams. None of that. How in the world can I think I'm in charge of anything? You know? And unfortunately, that's what happens. We become successful and we go, yeah, it's because I'm that good. Well, not really.
As we land this plane, we have a closing tradition on the podcast to ask a few quick fire questions.
Okay.
So answer with the first thing that pops up in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which book are you currently reading?
I'm reading Golden Hill by Francis Spufford. It's about old New York in 1746. Fascinating book.
Cool. Best piece of advice you've ever received?
Don't swing at every ball they throw at you. That's one of the pieces of advice I've read. And by the way, I'm reading like 5 books at the same time. But anyway, that's the novel I'm reading.
Very cool. Name one item on your bucket list.
to take my wife to France where I played rugby. We've never been there in 30 years. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. In Aurillac.
Your go-to activity when you want to relax and unwind?
Golf. Surfing. Yeah. But golf.
One tip to meet new people and make friends?
Be a friend.
Seems easy enough.
It's very underestimated, but be a friend. Be a good friend. That's what I want to say to kids as well at school. Like, don't rely on your pull count. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's the pull-in count. Rely on being a good friend. You'll have a lot healthier relationships.
Favorite sport to watch or play?
Favorite sport to play and watch is probably golf, followed by a very close equals rugby.
Okay.
Yeah, I love playing rugby and golf, and surfing, I guess, all three of those.
What is your favorite outdoor activity? It might be one of those as well.
You know what? One of my favorite outdoor activities for my wife is to go walk on the Hermanus cliff path.
Oh, nice.
Absolutely love doing it. Absolutely. That other than golf, that is probably my most favorite thing, is to go for a walk with her, because we talk and we jaw, and it's just champagne air in the gorgeous mountains. It's really a rest for the soul. Yeah.
Do you guys do that often?
Whenever we're there, it's like almost every morning activity, and now we're adding in cold swims as well, which is woohoo.
Nice.
But it's lekker, and a coffee after. Yeah, it's one of the jammiest things I do, yeah.
Nice. Last question. Complete the sentence. Life is all about?
Knowing God. And I know that might sound like a corny answer, but go and do it, and then we'll talk.
Frank, thank you so much for your time.
You got it.
I really appreciated having you here. Every time I speak to you, you're just a wealth of knowledge, and I want to hold my mouth and just listen to everything that you say.
There was a wealth of stupidity before the knowledge came. And that is not even mine.
It's great to walk alongside you and see how you live a full life and rich in community. Your book has made a big impact on me.
Awesome,
I've learned a lot from your stories that you play, in the characters that you play, and I've learned a lot from watching the story of your life. And to me, that has meant a lot in shaping the way that I think and that I do. And I'm very curious and excited to see what the next season of your life looks like.
Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it. It's humbling, because I know how schmuckish I am and how good and kind God is in us, so. But yeah, thanks, because that's the one thing that it bends my head when I think about how much of whatever it is that we are is His goodness or kindness shared with us, and who knows what the next season's going to look like. I just don't want to leave the place I've got to, or His wing, under His wing. So
thank you.
Thanks for the time, man.
Awesome.
May everyone flourish.
To delve even deeper into Frank's testimony, read his autobiography, The Vagabond, available online at Takealot, loot.co.za and Kumbooks. You can also find him on Instagram at Frank Rautenbach. Thanks for listening to the Framework to Flourish podcast, hosted by Marco Haasbroek and produced in collaboration with Imagine This. For today's episode, Stefanie de Toy was our coordinator, John Rehoog our technical producer, and Karina Kloppers our content producer. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram or LinkedIn at Flourish Workshops to stay up to date with our latest episodes, workshops and retreats. Until next time, keep going and growing.